Hello friends, welcome to Dungeons & Dragonfly, where I adapt various characters for use in D&D. I am that Dragonfly, Dragonfly 9078, and today I'll be building Dear Sweet Precious Casey from Homestuck. So let me tell you about Casey. Imagine, if you will, that you are a young salamander of unknown gender, living your best life, farming all these goddamn mushrooms, perhaps wishing you had a fashionably rumpled head accessory. Then, out of nowhere, the prophesied savior of your world appears before you, gives you a battered stuffed rabbit, declares you to be his daughter, and then kidnaps you. Such is the origin of Casey the Salamander. Casey would travel with the Heir of Breath for a short time before being adopted by the Seer of Light, who bestowed upon Casey the title Viceroy Bubbles von Salamancer and instructed them in the ways of dark magic. Despite magic's incredibly high fakeness attribute, the Viceroy proved to be adept at summoning legions of the undead, even playing a minorly pivotal role in the final battle for the fate of the multiverse. So, what do we want from this build? Well, first of all, the Viceroy needs the trappings of their office, including the ability to cast spells, even though, as I said before, magic is definitely fake. Second, the Viceroy's specialty is summoning the Dark Legions, so we'll need some necromancy. And finally, Casey needs to be a salamander, I guess. I'm gonna be honest with you, Casey's a pretty minor character, so there really isn't all that much for me to go on. Looking over at ability scores, I'll be using the standard point array from the player's handbook. If you're rolling for stats, make sure Intelligence and Charisma are high enough to multiclass. We'll start off with an 8 in Strength. Casey is just a young salamander, and they can use skeletons to lift whatever needs lifting. Dexterity will be 12. The salamanders are meant to operate complicated machinery on the behalf of the heroes, so they need to be good with their hands. Constitution will be 13. Casey had the physical fortitude to resist the negative environmental effects of being on a planet covered in lava, and we'll put our 14 in Intelligence. The salamanders aren't presented as the brightest of creatures, but Casey seems to pick up magic pretty quickly. Wisdom is a little low. The salamanders are generally expected to follow orders, so they rarely do much heavy thinking. They're also explicitly weak-minded in the way that makes them vulnerable to mind control. And finally, Charisma will be our highest stat because, come on, look at that face. Now, salamander folk isn't a race in 5th edition, but Grung are pretty close. I recognize the blasphemy inherent in making Casey a frog person, and the danger that I'm putting them in from the Agents of Durst, but there aren't any other 5th edition races that fit as well as Grung does. All Grung get +2 to their dexterity and +1 to their constitution, making both 14, as well as proficiency in perception. Grung are small, giving them only a 25-foot walking speed, but they make up for it by also having both a 25-foot climbing speed and the ability to jump a full 25 feet forward and 15 feet up without a running start. They're also immune to both poison damage and the poison condition, and have poisonous skin, poisoning any creature that fails a DC 12 Constitution save after touching their bare skin. This poison can also be applied to a piercing weapon, making it deal 2d4 poison damage to a creature that fails their Constitution save. Grung can breathe both air and water, but they're also prone to drying out. If a Grung doesn't immerse themselves in water for at least 1 hour each day, they get a level of exhaustion that can only be removed by magic or by spending an hour in water. For our background, we are a small child that was press-ganged into the service of a follower of the Horror Terrors, and later learned to summon the undead. Believe it or not, there's actually a background for that. Haunted ones all went through some kind of traumatic supernatural event. We get proficiency in investigation and survival, as well as 2 languages, one of which is an exotic language, like Celestial or Abyssal. Fun fact, the only language that Grung automatically speak is Grung, so for our common language, we'll take Common. The aforementioned Horror Terrors appear to be some form of aberration, so we'll also take a Deep Speech. We first get our powers from the Seer of Light, so we'll start off as a Warlock. Casey was her Viceroy, her right-hand salamander, so we'll take Arcana and Religion for our skills. Now, exactly what patron the Seer counts as is a little tricky. She's a god of light, so Celestial makes sense, but she hadn't yet ascended to her full godhood when we studied under her, and Celestial doesn't really fit with our aesthetic, so I'd actually recommend the Undying patron. As followers of the Undying, we are among the dead, giving us advantage on saves versus disease, and forcing undead that try to hit us to make a wisdom save. If the undead fails that save, they have to target someone else. This doesn't work on undead that we have attacked, however, and if they make the save, then they're immune for 24 hours. We also learn the Spare the Dying cantrip, and once per day when we use it to stabilize a creature, or when we pass a death save of our own, we regain 1d8 plus our Constitution modifier HP. Undying Warlocks get a handful of useful benefits from their undying nature, making it so we don't need to eat, drink, sleep, or breathe, though we do still need rest to reduce exhaustion, and we do still benefit from taking short and long rests. We also age much more slowly, aging 1 year for every 10 that pass, and we're unable to be aged magically. To represent our pact with the Seer of Light, we wear a talisman that she crafted with her own sorceress knitting needles, specifically this fashionable purple scarf. As long as we wear it, we can add a d4 to a failed ability check that we make an amount of times per day equal to our proficiency bonus. And with one of our Eldritch Invocations, we can add a d4 to any failed saves as well. They don't share a pool either, so if our proficiency bonus is 6, we get 6 d4s to ability checks, as well as 6 d4s to saving throws every day. Speaking of Eldritch Invocations, as 10th level Warlocks we get to pick 4 more. Armor of Shadows lets us cast Mage Armor at will, without using a spell slot, making our AC 13 plus our Dexterity modifier. Devil's Sight will let us see normally in regular or magical darkness out to 120 feet, since we don't have dark vision normally. Undying Servitude lets us cast Animate Dead without using a spell slot once per day, and the Eyes of the Runekeeper will help us fulfill our duties as Viceroy by allowing us to read all writing. We get 2 ability score improvements from our Warlock levels, and we'll use 1 on the Resilient feat, giving us +1 Intelligence and proficiency with Intelligence saves. With the other, we'll round off both our Charisma and our Intelligence to 16. Warlocks don't really get enough spell slots to be great necromancers though, so let's do some independent study and take some levels of Wizard. Arcane Recovery lets us regain an expended 5th level spell slot on a short rest once per day. Technically, we can regain any number of spell slots with a combined level of 5 or less, but we're pretty much just going to be summoning our undead friends, and the spells we use for that are either 3rd level or 5th level, so we'll take the 5th level slot. We can always upcast a 3rd level spell later. We'll join the School of Necromancy, halving the time and gold it takes us to copy down necromancy spells. We also regain HP when we kill a creature with a spell once per turn, if the creature we killed wasn't a construct or undead. The spell does have to be at least 1st level, and we heal twice the spell's level. If the spell was a necromancy spell, we heal 3 times the spell's level instead. At 6th level, we learn to make undead thralls. When we cast Animate Dead, we can target an additional corpse or pile of bones, and when we use any necromancy spell to create an undead, that undead has 10 extra HP, and adds our proficiency bonus to its damage rolls. Our capstone will be the 10th level of Necromancer, making us inured to undeath, giving us resistance to necrotic damage, and making it so our HP maximum can't be reduced. We'll also use our 2 ability score improvements from Wizard to bump both our Charisma and our Intelligence up to 18. Taking a look at our spellcasting, we are a 10th level spellcaster with 2 extra 5th level slots from our Pact Magic. We get a handful of cantrips from both the Warlock and Wizard lists, like Mending to fix our skeleton's cracked bones, and Acid Splash to glub some sinister friendship bubbles. But our main spells are going to be Animate Dead and Dance Macabre. Animate Dead is a necromancer's bread and butter. It's a 3rd level spell that turns a corpse or pile of bones within 10 feet of us into a zombie or skeleton that follows our orders for 24 hours. We can also recast it before the 24 hours are up to extend the time by a further 24 hours. If we use a higher level spell slot to cast it, the spell makes an additional 2 creatures per level, so using a 5th level spell slot will make an extra 4 skeletons. The problem is that Animate Dead takes a full minute to cast. That's a pretty abysmal startup time in terms of usability in combat, which is why we have Dance Macabre. Dance Macabre is a 5th level spell that only takes 1 action to cast, but it requires our concentration to maintain. We reanimate 5 corpses within 60 feet, and can direct them as a bonus action. They also gain a bonus to their attack and damage rolls equal to our spellcasting modifier. The spell lasts for an hour or until we drop concentration, at which point they become inanimate again. Hopefully by then we'll be done with combat, and we can spare a minute to use Animate Dead on them. We'll round off our spell list with a handful of divinations, since the Seer of Light is, well, a seer. Augury lets us use a magic 8-ball to ask about the outcome of a course of action we plan to take. The ball says wheel for good, woe for bad, wheel and woe for both good and bad, or nothing for neither good nor bad. And Scrying uses our magic 8-ball as a magic crystal ball, creating an invisible sensor at the targeted area, or by the targeted creature, that lets us see and hear everything that's going on for 10 minutes. Now that the build is complete, the question becomes, how good is it? Well, we are a pro at making friends, with the ability to summon 44 skeletons per long rest with just Animate Dead, a number that increases with every short rest we take, thanks to Arcane Recovery and our Warlock slots refreshing on short rests. We're also very good at saving throws, with proficiency in saves for all of our mental stats, and protection of the talisman to boost any saves that we fail. And we're not bad at gathering information either, with a climbing speed, water breathing, and Devil's Sight to sneak around, and divination spells to just straight up spy on people. On the other hand, skeletons are really, really weak. They're only a CR 1/4 monster, so even with our enhancements from Undead Thralls and Dance Macabre, they don't last long in a brawl. We can make up for that with sheer numbers, but summoning that many friends doesn't really leave us with spell slots for much else. And finally, just like our skeleton friends, we are not hard to hit. Mage armor only gets us to 15 AC, and half of our levels being in Wizard definitely doesn't do us any favors when it comes to hit dice. But we don't want to fight, we just want to go on an adventure with our new friends. And if we end up doing something important, like, say, beating up a bunch of leprechauns, well, I'm sure that won't be the weirdest thing that happens that day. I hope you enjoyed the build. If you have any feedback or suggestions of characters to build, please leave them in the comments below. I do have a backlog of characters to get through, but I don't have a specific order to them, so if I get an interesting suggestion, there's no reason I couldn't do it sooner. Thank you for watching, friends, and I will see y'all later.